Hello there, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Talking Nerdy, the show where we take various story arcs and events from comics and we cover them. I'm your host, Obi-Wan Jabroni. Now, our story today that we'll be covering is Curse of the Man-Thing. It's a 9-chapter story that's spread across 3 giant-sized specials to celebrate the 50-year anniversary of Man-Thing's first appearance in Strange Things #1 from May of 1971. It is written by Steve Orlando, who's making his Marvel Comics debut. He's popular for writing things in DC, such as Batman, Wonder Woman, and Martian Manhunter. And with that, let's start talking nerdy. First up, we have Avengers Curse of the Man-Thing, with art by Francesco Mobile and colors by Guru EFX. Now, Chapter 1, Bad Seed, opens in the Substranium, the home base of horticulture. Now, horticulture is 4 zealous botanist bioengineers that happen to also be geriatric grannies. Don't worry too much about it. They made their first appearance in X-Men #3 just 2 years ago. Anyway, we meet our new villain, the Harrower. Now, she has red lines all up and down, graphed all up and down her arms. Now, those are lines of magic, which horticulture wants nothing to do with. They are strictly science and believe in natural selection. But Harrower is the niece of one of the members, Augusta, and she wants to mass murder all humans and let natural selection repick its course. Who knows what can come, but she wants to do it with a combination of magic and science. And horticulture, they don't want nothing to do with it. They don't want mass murder. They say that's not natural selection. That's just selection. And they don't want nothing to do with her magic. Nothing at all. Now, she wants to use Man-Thing, who, if you don't know, used to be a scientist named Ted Silas. Now, Ted Silas was working to try to recreate the super soldier serum. Not working out too well for him, and his wife didn't want him anything to do with it. Now, his wife sells him out to AIM. So in his flurry to run and get the hell out of there, he injects himself with his test serum. And while he's driving away, he wrecks his car into a swamp. Now, this swamp consisted of some supernatural waters that mixed with the serum inside his corpse and rose the husk, becoming the Man-Thing. Now, Man-Thing's a giant swamp creature. He's made of vines and everything, and all who know fear are said to burn at the Man-Thing's touch. Now, anyway, she wants to use him to try to mass murder all civilization, wipe out all humans, fuck them, let nature run back over again. So she teleports away, pissed that her aunt won't help her with horticulture. And that takes us to Citrusville, Florida. Now, Man-Thing's walking through his swamp and he hears a scream for help. Now, he goes over there and there's an old man, and everything from the waist down is turned into flowers, vines, and he is screaming. He don't know what to do. He sees Man-Thing and he says, "The woman said you would come. She knew my screams would come bring you to me." And vines explode out of his body in every direction, and Harrower appears standing behind Man-Thing and starts whooping on his ass hard. Now, during this fight, she shoves her hand right through the middle of his chest towards the end and rips his entire heart out. And there's a big old vine and a root attached to it. Rips it straight out of his chest and just tosses it to the side as Man-Thing falls to the ground dead. Man-Thing falls to the ground dead. And pollen comes, little dust of pollen flies off the heart of Man-Thing while she's turned away. She starts skinning him, saying that these materials would be perfect and that the harrowing of Earth starts at sunrise. Ooh. And that takes us into Chapter 2. Now, we get a montage through various cities of Brooklyn, Avengers Mountain, London, Sydney, and LA. And we go to Wakanda, where we learn that Black Panther is on the comms with the Avengers, and he has sent them out to these various cities. Now, the current run of Avengers, if you don't know, consists of She-Hulk and Captain America, who he has sent to Brooklyn, Blade and Thor, which he sent to London, Iron Man and Captain Marvel that he sends to Sydney, Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes Ghost Rider, that he has sent to LA, and Panther himself in Wakanda. And we learned that these giant stalks have came up from the ground right at sunrise all over the world in every city. And these stalks are releasing a pollen that if you breathe it in, you catch fire. If you touch the stalk itself, you catch fire. And it's also releasing these giant winged creatures that if you touch them, guess what? You catch fire. So he sends these teams out to the various cities, and we switch over to Cap and She-Hulk specifically. Now, they're fighting all these creatures, trying to keep all the civilians evacuated and safe, trying to keep them contained towards their stalks. When that pollen that came off of Man-Thing's heart earlier floats through the air and lands upon Cap's shield, bursting into an explosion of vines that completely engulf him in a husk of vines. Now, She-Hulk don't care. She calls, let Black Panther know, and just keeps fighting, saying it's more for her. Now, Cap wakes up, and he's in a swamp. It's real dark around him. It's just a little circle of water with some trees around it, essentially. And out of those shadows walk four people. William Burnside, Nuke, Anti-Captain America, and Protocide, who are all dead super soldiers from years past, or people who have tried to be the new Captain America and instead and failed. They all start attacking Cap, and they are whooping his ass. He's down on the ground. They're beating on him, and Protocide pins his foot against his face while he's on the ground. When out of the shadows jumps somebody who we don't get to see, who knocks over Protocide and allows Cap to jump up, and they start fighting, and collectively they take down the four, who just disappear into the waters. We don't get to see who that was yet that helped Cap, but we will later, don't worry. Because we switch back over and we see a scene from each group of Avengers throughout the city, and they're still fighting and fighting. They're getting wore down. They ain't doing very good. There's no end of these creatures in sight. They just keep pouring and pouring out of the stalks. And that brings us into Chapter 3, Breathing Fire. Now, Cap rises after they defeat all four people and turns to greet his savior, who turns out to be Ted Silas, who is thought to be long dead and is the host of the Man-Thing. And Ted explains that they are in the smallest bit of consciousness that's left alive of the Man-Thing, essentially his own micro-dimension within his own body. And that he has been stuck here for decades, not able to control Man-Thing, but only watch everything that he does. That was until Harrower showed up killing the Man-Thing. Now, after that, he went to Cap, he floated along and went to Cap specifically to ask him for help. Because he thinks that all this destruction upon Earth is a product of Harrower weaponizing his Man-Thing's DNA. And Cap, he knows about Ted Silas. He knows who he is. And he knows that he was trying to recreate the serum and how he died and that he's been the host of Man-Thing. And he thinks that Ted might be able to help stop this himself. He has the power within him, since he is the one that created Man-Thing and has been inside Man-Thing all these years. And Ted goes on, and he's pissed at this point. He's frantic. He's been stuck here for decades by himself with no one to talk to. And he screams out that he didn't create the serum. It wasn't him all along. And that's where our issue ends. That leads us into Amazing Spider-Man Curse of the Man-Thing, with art by Mark Falia and colors again by Guru EFX. We open with Chapter 4, Invasive Species, where we see all across the globe the fight rages on. And in New York, various spider people have joined the fray, such as Peter Parker Spider-Man, Miles Morales Spider-Man, Madam Web, Silk, Spider-Girl, Spider-Woman, and Ghost Spider. The whole Ghost family's here. And they're helping the Avengers fight all these creatures. And we go to Man-Thing's swamp. And Harrower's knelt down. She's admiring all her work in the waters of the swamp all across the world, just smiling. And she's confronted from behind by two members of horticulture, Augusta and Lily. And they tell her this is not how we do things. Mass murder is not horticulture's way. Harrower stands and turns and starts to run. And as she runs away, they're firing at her. And she gets trapped in a dead-end room. She turns and puts her hands up, ready to surrender, and horticulture charges in, ready to capture her. But they fall through a hole in the floor, just a black pit. Harrower goes over, you can't see nothing in there. So we switch back over to Inside Man-Thing's dimension, where Ted is explaining to Cap that he tried and tried and tried to break the serum, just wasn't able to. But his college roommate, Kurt Connors, was able to help and cracked it himself. And that he couldn't help this, but maybe Kurt Connors can. And he turns to Cap, still pissed off about everything, and says, "This is my prison, Cap. I've earned it. Now get the hell out." And at that moment, back in reality, Cap bursts from his vine husk and immediately asks, "Who can find me, Kurt Connors?" And that takes us to Chapter 5, Meeting of the Monsters. Now, we open at Empire State University, ESU, and Cap and Dr. Connors are standing over a lab table that has the remaining vines, the husk that Cap busted out of earlier, the only remains of Man Thing's body. And he's explaining to Connors what's happened with Ted and Harrower and everything that's going on, and that Ted says that the only person that can fix all this is Dr. Connors, because he cracked the serum. Now, Connors starts to deny that he ever cracked the serum. He's real confused, but at that moment, vines shoot out and engulf him of a husk of his own, taking him into Man Thing's dimension. Now, once inside, Ted runs up and embraces him. It's the first time he's seen a familiar face in decades. He's had no one to talk to other than Cap, and he didn't really know him. So, Ted tells him that he's sorry that he had to lie to Cap, but he felt that Connors was truly the only one that could fix this, and that Kurt had no idea what it was like to be so low with no good options. Kurt kind of smiles and says, "You have no idea what I know," because he's gone through the whole ordeal becoming a Spider-Man villain, the Lizard, through a serum of his own, and Ted has no idea about this. He's been thought to be dead and gone for decades now. So, at that point, they're interrupted by an earthquake-like rumble, and Ted explains that outside in reality, the husk that's protecting Connor's body right now is being attacked. And we flash back to reality, and we see Cap struggling to fight off swarms of the flying creatures that have busted in, trying to make their way into the husk itself. And as Ted says that, Connor starts to scream and transform to the lizard within the dimension as well. And Ted freaks the fuck out and tells him to get away and get out. And at that moment, Lizard bursts from his husk, pissed off and fully transformed, and jumps in and helps Cap fight off all these creatures. Now, they fight for a while, and Spidey comes crashing through the skylight, Peter Parker Spider-Man, just surrounded by a swarm of his own. And he jumps up and he starts helping fight, and he explains to them that every creature in the city suddenly turned and started making its way towards this lab in ESU that they're in. And Lizard says he thinks they sense the Man-Thing awakening. And at that moment, every creature in the room just bursts into flames. And they're continuing to fight these now flaming creatures. And Lizard tells Spidey, as much as he hates and loathes to admit it, that Spidey was responsible for helping pull him from his darkest places and keep some semblance of Kurt Connors even within the Lizard still, and that he needs to go help Ted. Now, why the rest of them hold off creatures for him? He approaches the pile of, the husk vines, and he touches out with a finger, and they shoot out as he screams "not in the face," and they engulf him into a prism of his own. Bringing us into the final chapter of this issue, Mutualistic Mayhem. Now, Spidey's inside Man-Thing's dimension, and he's trying to convince Ted to help him, but Ted says he can't. He made a deal with the devil a long time ago, and he lost everything because of it. And what's happening out there is his fault, that this was his punishment. And Spidey just shakes his head, and he makes two web chairs and tells Ted to sit. Now, at this point, he begins to give a beautiful speech that I'm just going to read word for word for you real quick. Now, they sit down in their chairs, and Spidey goes, "You think you're the only one to make bad choices? Whatever you did, you don't have the market cornered on selfish. I've dabbled, and it cost me. You think all of this is some type of prison. Maybe it is. I've thought like that too. Turned out I was the jailer, and I was the only one who could break myself out. Dr. Connors wanted me to make you see that, but the truth is, I can't. Can't make you do anything. No one can stop you from doing nothing and sinking deeper. Whatever you're scared of, you can take responsibility for it. You want to control this thing, want to make Man-Thing more than a prison? That's where you start. You make a bad choice, Silas. You did it. So what are you going to do now?" Now, that takes us back into reality, where Spider-Man shoots a hand out of his husk, shoots out some webs, and bursts from it himself, saying that he tried everything he could, but everything was just up to Ted now. And they start fighting again. And as they fight, the vines start to grow out, shooting out and grabbing individual creatures. And it grabs every creature in the flaming creature in the room, pulling it into its body. And as it starts to pull in the creatures, it's growing bigger and bigger until it forms the resurrection. Sorry, the resurrected man thing. Now, he starts fighting, and he has pulled every creature that is in this room into him, and Spidey welcomes him back. And as he does, the man thing just looks over and sinks completely through the floor, just leaving a small puddle of water behind him. And Spidey, Cap, and Connors are looking around all confused. They don't know where the hell he went. He didn't say a word. He just bounced the fuck up out of there. And we see Man Thing rise up out of the ground again leaving a water puddle outside his old office, or outside his own office in a different spot on the ESU campus. Now, he walks in, and we get this really cool dual framed portrait with Man Thing on one side and Ted within the dimension on the other, and it's split down the center, and they're doing the exact same motions. They cut the symbol that's right here, and it's 3 triangles with a circle in the center. And they both do this, and as they're doing this, Ted's saying, "I'm sorry, Ellen." That's his wife. "I love you, and I gave up so much. You gave up so much for me. It's time I gave something." And Man Thing and Ted both rise their hands as an orb falls from that circle on their chest, and they set it on the ground. And they raise their hands, and they smash down on it, busting them. Now, there's this giant blue light that cuts through the whole area, lightening the whole room, and we get this real cool panel, split down, gorgeous colors of them smacking into it. And they raise up, and as the light begins to fade, someone behind him says, "Speak of the devil, and she shall appear." And he turns to see Ileana Rasputin, aka Magic. She's the current Queen of Limbo, sister of the X-Men's Colossus, and current citizen of the mutant nation of Krakoa herself. She smiles, and that ends our issue. Taking us into our final issue of the series, X-Men Curse of the Man-Thing, with art by Andrea Briccardo and colors by Guru EFX. Now, Chapter 7, Devils in Dark Rooms. Now, we open with Magic sitting in the windowsill, still in the office at ESU, and she asks Man Thing if he's confused why she appeared to his perfect summons, and what he's going to do about the world on fire. Now, we switch back into Man Thing's swamp in Citrusville, Florida, and Harrower's sitting banging on the ground, still trying to get into the pit that Horticulture fell in earlier. Now, she looks in and she says she can feel the power of all realities in this hole. And she vows to break through and take her harrowing of Earth multiversal. And we get a montage of all around the world, all the heroes are still fighting to try to keep all the stalks and creatures at bay. But on Krakoa, everything is at peace. The stalk's completely inert, and we look at the Quiet Council, the leaders of the nation of Krakoa, which consists of, at the moment anyway, Professor X, Magneto, Doug Ramsey Cypher, Storm, Nightcrawler, Sebastian Shaw, Emma Frost, Kitty Pryde, who's going by Kate now because she's all grown up, Mr. Sinister, Mystique, and Exodus. And we learned that they approved of Magic going and trying to help Ted and try to stop all these supernatural occurrences. But they're not sure if Krakoa's get themselves completely involved. Some think they should let the humans just manage it because they never want to help them either. But it ends and we start a vote. Now, back at ESU, Magic approaches Man-Thing, and he holds out his hand, and she grabs it, saying, "Sure, I'm game," and is pulled into his dimension, where she explains to Ted that she inherited her deal from the former king of Limbo, Belasco, and she's willing to cancel out the deal. But if she does so, it disconnects Ted and Man-Thing completely, and he becomes completely mindless, and the world will continue to truly burn down. And that takes us into our final chapter, Chapter 9, New Growth. All around the world, the mutants of Krakoa have jumped in and are trying to help everybody. We see Storm making tornadoes and windstorms, sucking in all the pollen and creatures she can and sending them through Magic's portals into the sun. While inside Man-Thing's dimension, Ted tells Harrower that Man-Thing isn't just the guardian of all nexuses. He houses an own dark reality of his own. And because of what Harrower did, he now had an escape and was in complete control of said dimension. She charges at Ted and tries to strangle him, saying, "Do you have any idea what I have done to get here?" And Ted just smiles, unaffected completely by her strangle attempts, and says, "No, but the dreamscape knows." And her dad comes up behind her and grabs her, dragging her away towards a burning house that wasn't there moments ago behind them. And Ted says, "We're done here, Harrower." And all around the world, stalks start to sink into the ground as the creatures are being wiped up and finalized by the rest of the heroes. And he says, "You're afraid, Harrower. I can sense it. And whatever knows fear burns at the Man-Thing's touch." And at that point in reality, Man-Thing rears back and Harrower is burst from his chest, completely engulfed in flames. She stands up and she starts running and screaming and falls into that hole that Horticulture fell in earlier. Now, it switches over, and inside, wherever this portal has sent them, Harrower's laying on the ground, and the flames start to dwindle out. She's no longer on fire. And she looks up to see Augusta and Lilla, the members of Horticulture from earlier, standing over her, saying, "Don't worry. We've studied multiple realities in the multiverse our entire life, and we know how to get home. But when we do, we're going to sit down and have a nice long talk with you." Now, we switch to 7 days later in Citrusville, Florida. A sorceress, Jennifer Hale, she's popped up in Doctor Strange and various other supernatural titles throughout Marvel. Now, she's a sorceress, and she's sitting there and she's opening a portal. Now, through this portal comes a screaming Belasco, and he's pissed. He says, "Who dares pull me from my world?" And Hale smiles and says, "She dares. And she had to do it. She owed a debt," and just walks away. Belasco's standing there pissed and threatening to kill her when vines shoot up out of the ground around Belasco and pull him into the dreamscape, where we see Ted and Man-Thing both standing there. Ted smiling and says, "What do you think, brother? Should we finally give the devil his due?" That ends the Curse of the Mutants. I hope you all enjoyed this story, and join us next week where we talk about the prologue chapters for Star Wars War of the Bounty Hunters. And as always, remember to like, subscribe, and possibly leave a comment below. Feedback is always welcome. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at Jabroni Nerd Network. Thanks for watching, guys, and remember, stay sweaty and keep talking nerdy. I'll see you all next week.